Somebody around out in there was fixing to build a house like the Jennings and all them. I didn't know them, but he'd always call me in his office over there. It was up on Forest Avenue then, where crossing the old hotel down there. He called me in talking to me about these people out there, if I knew them and all that. And just about every house down through there was financed by him, JD. But when me and Nell bought down there, Mr. Eubanks, the old man that owned that up through there, he was wanting to get all that sold on the far side of the street from us, and he made me a deal on them, and I had enough money. I bought all those lots from Billy Jack up there down to the Jennings, and I just put those signs up. That's all advertising ever done, and it wasn't long to the people that moved in down there our age, pretty close to our age. Nearly every one of them was about the same, and they was all having kids, and all of us, the Johnson. And I sold Mr. and Miss Johnson, Martha and Jimmy, sold them a lot. Sold Justin one. The farmer guy, do you remember him? Lived on down there 2 doors up from the Jennings. Sold him one. And I forgot how many houses they were over there, about 10 or 12. And I owned all that for a long time. And we had a boat. Do you remember our boat? I didn't have a garage down there at the time, and that was, she had that riding lawnmower, and she would cut the grass, keep everything, and every time she had to mow it, she was mad because she couldn't move that boat around. She told me, she says, you don't do something with that boat, so I'm gonna sell it. So I come in one day and she'd sold it. But Nell was, I'd say, my secretary. She could handle the books. She could handle changing my catalog. She could handle anything that come along. The only thing, whenever we first moved there, she didn't have a driver's license. And I bought her a little old car. It was a Dodge from Mr. What you call him up at the crossroads, had the garage, His mother died, and I bought it from him, and she liked that little old car. But it wasn't long after that, the Wagner up there, he had that little MG, and he never did have a sign on it for sale. And every time we'd drive up through there, she'd say, why don't you go over there and see if you can buy that car from him? I let it go, I guess, 4 or 5 months. And I stopped in there one day, and he told me what it'd take for it, and I bought it. And back then, we didn't have computers like we had today. Every time you had a day's work, you had to go mail it at night, and I don't know if you remember that or not. But she got tired of fooling with that boat, and every night we'd get in that little old MG and go to the post office. And the next stop was some little ice cream stand over in East Gadsden, sort of like a Jack's. And we'd go in there and get a dime's worth of ice cream and nickel's worth of nuts. You know who taught us that? What was his name? Terry Eubanks. He would go with us every now and then. And if Nell wasn't going, I'd call him and say, Terry, you want to ride with me? Well, the first time he rode with me, he said, pull over down here when I was coming back. And I went up there to get me a Sunday and gonna get Nell one to carry back home. And he got over there in the window and he said, I want a dime's worth of ice cream and a nickel's worth of nuts. And it was about as big as my Sunday. It was back then about 35, 40 cents. But he was a sight. But Terry, if you remember, I don't guess you do though, him and Mark was not far apart in age. God, he'd come riding up. He had a motorcycle that was really loud, and they all knew when he was coming. He'd come down there and sit, and him and Mark carrying on, talk, and you know, all that. We had known Terry since he was a small kid. But you know, the old man Eubanks, him and her, his wife, they was good folks. When we moved in down there, he'd come down there every now and then just to see how we was doing, if we needed anything done. And I borrowed a lot of tools from him. I remember one time I borrowed some kind of a sling blade or something. I broke the handle out of it, and I carried it back and told him. And he said, well, I got him over here at the hardware store. I had to go get him a handle for it. But he was out of the way. He'd tell you how it was. Do you remember whenever I used to go on those trips with Mr. Porter and Mr. Fry and all them? She was always a little bit leery of things at night, but I don't think she ever got uptight about anything, did she? She wasn't scared. But Nell, didn't want to get into it with Nell. But I don't know if she had that in her Indian blood or whatever. But you know, we had married, 67 years or whatever. We had a few little old fusses and growlings at each other. But she never left me to go home to Mom and Daddy. And she would just, when she'd go down there during the EA week or something, I was hoping she'd stay a week with her mama, and well, they could go do things, and I could do. But I had to cook for myself, and TV dinners was my thing. But she'd call about Wednesday, and she'd say, can I come home? And she wasn't one to stay away from home. And when you kids was little, she was right there with y'all all the time. Just with her thoughts and ideas on things. And I guess that's the reason that both of y'all turned out as well as she fly flapping mean.
Threatness with you. You used to wear me out all the time.
Yeah, I know that fly flap.
Now I can honestly say I don't ever remember you whipping me. She just always
but you know, I just remember what my daddy told me. He said, he started to whip me and he said, boy, this is hurting me. Whipping him.
She never told me that with a fly swatter.
No.
She just chased me around the table.
But them boys, every evening would come in and play baseball or football in the front yard, and she'd always fix a cake and have some iced tea. Back then we didn't have all that many Cokes, you know. and I still run across people like Ed Lett and all them is talking about how good she could make them. She used to make those cakes, you know, that had apple topping on it. And them boys still today talk about her cooking and she used to bring them out for snacks.
Hey, what was the story about Kenny Whitmire and her running over him?
Well, you know, I bought her that little old Volkswagen, and she couldn't drive a straight shift. I had to get an automatic stick. And every time she'd go to pick up one of y'all at school, there'd be 4 or 5 or 6 want to jump in the car. And Kenny couldn't get in the car, I don't think. His foot slipped and went up another, and she rolled over. And she wouldn't go talk to Mr. and Miss Whitmire about it. She sent me up there. And she that bothered her. And hey, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, you know, he worked at the post office, and I think he still does. And she said, I still can't get that off my mind, running over his foot. It broke his foot. But it wore on her till just a few years ago.
She was never right after that, though, was she?
about letting so many kids in the car. But you know, a little Volkswagen, it seemed like 3 or 4 is all it would carry.